Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always, Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I just got back from the immersive Van Gogh exhibit. Got a little culture, feel very sophisticated. I'm now ready to answer questions from listeners, name things like the proctorologist and Lyle Lanley. So, that really put me in the mood to I was like, he's really going to have to open with a good fart joke to get me mentally prepared to be in the space that I need to be in. So go ahead.
Well, how immersive, Tom? Do you have both of your ears still?
That's a good question. Yes, I did. It was like the end of the third Indiana Jones movie where the knife comes the big saw blade. I tuck and roll like Indy, but I know my I had my dad's diary, so it was okay. I got through all the tests, and I have both my ears, so it was good.
Good job. Good effort. Hopefully everybody made it out two-eared. Or, you know what, if they went in one ear and they came out just the one ear, that's fine too. I'm not judging. You know, Tom, the average human has fewer than two ears.
So I suppose that is technically true. Yes. Good job.
But we're not here to talk about that. We are here. It's kind of I don't want to say a lazy week because that implies other weeks that we have aren't also lazy. This is maybe more of an easier week as players are getting ready to head home for the holidays. We are going to do some listener question shows until something crazy happens, which very well could be at any moment, possibly even during the recording of the show as we wait for opt-outs and things like that to happen and any other hilarious coaching news that comes down. But no, we are going to start with some listener question shows, certainly some listener questions right now, unless something happens during the show, Tom, then we'll have to cut everything off and go to news. But until then, let's start the show.
All right. First one from Logic Buck. The mantra in recruiting has always been, quote, comfort and relationships. With NIL now in place and in full swing, what is more important, NIL endorsement deals or comfort and relationships? I can see where a school can build a relationship with a player over the course of a couple of years and the player feels comfortable with the campus and his potential teammates enough to commit. But a secondary school comes in 1 week before signing day and speaks to the player and, more importantly, the parent and offers them $500,000 a year to come play for their school.
Tom, do you remember when Ohio State was recruiting and had essentially locked up Jaden Woodby?
Mm-hmm.
And then Florida State comes out of nowhere and says, hey, you want to visit? And this was the week leading up to signing day. And Jaden Woodby did, and he signed with Florida State. Do you remember what kind of NIL deal he had at that point, Tom?
Well, officially or unofficially, because I believe officially it was $0. And I believe the prelude to that story was that Jaden Woodby basically said, hey, it's crazy. I grew up a Florida State fan and never got a Florida State offer. Mm-hmm. And then he got a Florida State offer. And then he went to Florida State and how'd that go for him, Tony? I mean, I feel like it was probably really outstanding because he went to play for Willie Taggart there, if I recall correctly. I'm pretty sure that ended up really well, lots of good bowl games and a long coaching tenure. Don't check my math on this.
Well, and I can't really get to Wikipedia right now, but we'll go ahead and believe that to be the case. It's Florida State. They couldn't possibly be bad. I mean, we grew up in the 90s. We know what we're talking about. But the idea that I still think it's going to come down to comfort and relationships. And you know who told me that or said it, and then I believe them? Jimbo Fisher mentioned this the other day. The big boogeyman for a lot of Ohio State fans talked about how, players shouldn't be choosing schools for NILs, and we can all chuckle and stuff like that. But it's still, you're putting a lot of effort into these players and to the families, and you are going to lose some to NILs, but that doesn't mean that you stop putting the effort in. Or as you are dealing with these families and recruiting these players, you should have a pretty good sense of who is not going to be in it for the long haul in terms of recruiting and who is just looking for the NIL buck. And depending on how good that player is and what kind of funds you have at your disposal, not that any schools have any funds at their disposal because they are not allowed to use NIL because they can't do these deals. But there are, this is part of the weeding out process. And if the player is, say, Walter Nolan, the number one defensive tackle in the nation, maybe you see what you can do in terms of, hey, here are the programs that some of our players have signed. Obviously, we know NIL is part of recruiting. Ohio State has talked about that, and it's not like they can share what goes on. But I think you've always had players leave at the last minute in terms of the recruiting, just like the would-be mentioned, and you're going to continue to have that. But I go back to what we saw from Quinn Ewers. Signed with Ohio State, made a bunch of money, wasn't going to play, left. There's going to be money at other schools. What you can't get everywhere is playing time. And ultimately, your players are going to want playing time. And nobody's going to pay a kid $500,000 a year to not play. That's not what, not for 2 or 3 years. Yes, for 1 year, maybe 2, because, well, you think, yeah, sure, you had to pay. That's like a little seed investment to get him in as a freshman. And then it's that second year. But if he doesn't win the job the second year, then it's like, well, come on. How many more times am I going to have to make this investment? I still think also $500,000 is pretty high. I was looking at some Texas A&M stuff from earlier this fall, and their average endorsement deal was like $1,300. And that's an idea of what goes on. And yes, I'm sure that will get to be more. And for football, it's probably a higher average, but it's the $500,000 is a couple of players, maybe.
Exactly. It's a couple of players. And if, Quinn Ewers is one of those players and Quinn Ewers doesn't work out, like, well, are you going to give the next Quinn Ewers that much money? Because Spencer Rattler was one of the people before the season that was, a huge, like potentially $1 million kind of investment. And that didn't work out real well. And especially if you were an Oklahoma-based business, that really didn't work out real well. And now he's the South Carolina quarterback. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess he's not going to make $1 million as a South Carolina quarterback. Just a guess. But, you have to remember that these are not, everyone has this idea that this is, like Mr. Moneybags from Monopoly, just ready to just make bank errors in your favor constantly, just for every recruit. It's like, number one, everyone does have an amount of money that they have. Like, no one has unlimited funds. And at some point, enough of these deals are going to go badly that people are going to go, maybe we don't need to do this. This is going to sort itself out. This is one of these free market things that eventually people are going to stop giving out crazy amounts of money, because you're going to see like, hey, I gave out, I gave out, a $250,000 deal to this kid, and he showed up for 3 months and then he left and went somewhere else, and I got no return on my investment at all. People will eventually stop doing that. I think that everyone is just assuming this is just going to be a straight line up every single year. And I don't know that that's necessarily true, especially on the top end deals. Like, maybe the total expenditure on NIL will continue to grow up year over year, but I don't think that this is going to be 2 years from now that the top college quarterbacks are making more than the top NFL quarterbacks. I don't think that that's reasonable to expect, because it's just, you're going to have enough of these deals go bust that people are going to be a little bit hesitant to. If a guy's got a couple of years in, and let's say Justin Fields a couple of years ago, 2019, comes off a really great season, 41 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, got Ohio State Big Ten championship, went to the college football playoff. Coming off of that year, potentially that's a year where you could have made a lot of money. But I don't think that you're going to see just these sort of blind offers to recruits just keep going up and up and up, like Disco Stew's graph of disco record sales. You're eventually going to hit a point where people are like, all right, like, we're not seeing the return on investment on this stuff. And, if you're doing this as a business, you do need to show some kind of return on investment. You're not just going to be throwing money in one of those cash tornado machines every time any kind of recruit steps on campus. That's just, I think everyone is just assuming that these trends are going to just continue unchanged forever. And I don't think that's probably how it's going to play out.
The idea of a Justin Fields in 2019 then becoming a free agent essentially in college football in 2020 is interesting to me, but I don't think he's going to leave somewhere for $1 million, $2 million, because he's 1 year away from signing a deal for $30 million, as long as he continues on the track. And the best way to continue on the track you're on is to stay on the track you're on. And Ohio State now has this track record of putting guys into the NFL. at quarterback and really any position. And if you're already in that trajectory, it doesn't make sense to jump off. Now, would it make sense for Matt Jones? Maybe, but you're talking. I mean, I don't know how much a school is going to get involved in bringing in transfers if they're already locking up all of the spots through recruiting. This whole the Longhorns thing with the Texas offensive lineman, where everybody comes in and they immediately get $50,000 for whatever recruits. Like, that money's already used; those spots are already used. Is there room for transfers? And they'd have to cut guys, and then there's going to be attrition. Just because you sign a guy doesn't mean you keep him. Again, look at Quinn Ewers. Look at the transfer portal right now. I don't care that Texas A&M has signed 7 5-stars in this class. They may not keep them. And you know what? And I talked, and this was something on the Ask the Insiders board where the original poster of this topic says Texas A&M is going to kill college football. And I'm saying, like, why? What are they doing? And it's like, well, they've signed 7 5-stars. Tom, Alabama signed 7 5-stars in 2021. Georgia did it in 2018. Mm-hmm. Like, has that killed college football? No, it's going to continue on, and you can't keep them all. And you could go back. Alabama loses players every year. Georgia loses players every year. Georgia has not lost anybody yet this year, but hey, they're in the playoff hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me again in January after all of the games are played, or in February, or in May. Like, this is you can't keep everybody. You can't keep everybody happy. The grass is very much greener, and the dollars are just as green elsewhere.
Right. And I think, the most important thing you said there was you have to remember, you've got, if you're a quarterback and you go somewhere and it's like, okay, well, I can get $1 million to go to, Tony, what's a school that doesn't develop quarterbacks? And don't say Michigan, pick another one. I can get $1 million to go play quarterback at Iowa. If I have NFL aspirations, do you think I'm going to go to Iowa and say, Brian Ferentz? There's a Reddit, I think, community called, I'm going to say Mess My Stuff Up. And it's just about people getting like extremely bad haircuts. Are you going to take $1 million? If you are a quarterback with NFL aspirations, are you going to go to Iowa City and say, Brian Ferentz, for $1 million, really mess my stuff up? Like, you're going to go somewhere where you're actually going to get developed, because you're better off getting half of the money up front from Ohio State, for example, or from Alabama, or from another school, Oklahoma, that has churned out NFL quarterbacks. You're better off doing that than going and taking, like, well, I'm going to get a little bit more money up front. And then obviously, I mean, I could go be the next, I don't know, who was the quarterback for Iowa in 2005? Tate something?
Drew Tate?
Drew Tate, yes, Drew Tate. I could be the next Drew Tate. I see you nodding your head, Tony. So I'm taking that as a yes. Like,
Ricky
I think Ricky Stanzi. I mean, love it or leave it, Tony. Iowa football, love it or leave it. Yeah, I think that you have to ultimately give kids a little more credit that they're going to make a smarter long-term decision. Not everyone is going to do that. Like, people go and sign up to play for all sorts of coaches. You're like, oh Lord, why would you do that? Like, every year Iowa signs offensive players. Like, it's a thing that happens every single year, believe it or not. Every year people sign up to play for an Alex Grinch defense. I don't understand it either, but it happens every single year. But on the whole, I think you kind of have to trust that people are going to figure out, like, hey, I need to take some long-term thought into this. And on the whole, you kind of have to trust that that's going to be how it works out, that you are going to have people thinking longer term than just, this one year. And, going back through, there was a class. How many 5-stars has Ohio State had in classes? Haven't they had 6 5-stars in a couple different classes?
5 in 2017. That was the Texas class.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had 5 or 6 in the maybe 2020.
I was thinking 2020 they had 5 or 6. I think. I mean, and it's just like, so this is not some crazy unprecedented thing, and this is a down year, quote unquote, for Ohio State, and they're still going to sign probably like 8 of the top 60 players or 8 of the top 70 players or something. Like, Ohio State football will be fine. Ohio State football continues to be at the very top of the Big Ten. Like, it'll be fine. You know, everyone, Ohio State loses one game, never wants to panic. And you know, this is clearly the beginning of the end. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, maybe. But Ohio State football continues to recruit extremely well. And Texas, which is, you know, obviously on its way to buying its way to the greatest recruiting classes in history. Tony, Texas has 27 players committed for 2021. Ohio State has 18. So 50% more than Ohio State. Tony, you want to guess who's ahead? Because they have, you know, even if they don't have the quantity, they have better quality players than all of the expensive Texas players. Texas has 9 more commits and they're ranked behind Ohio State. Like, I think everyone needs to just kind of just take a breath. It's okay. The world is not going to end in the next 48 to 72 hours. Probably. At least not because of this. So just take a breath. It's okay. Like, the Ohio State, rather famously, is almost never bad at football. And that's because they just sort of figure stuff out. Like, they'll figure it out. It'll be okay. Relax.
Yeah. And going back to Walter Nolan, I was reading an article with him because he's one of these Texas A&M defensive linemen, all of these 5-star guys. And everybody's like, oh, they only went to Texas A&M for the money. And I'm like, well, what money? What specifically? What are these programs? What are these NIL deals? And he himself said, if I went to a school for NIL money, I would have gone to Texas. Like, this was a football decision that he made instead of going to Texas A&M. Like, the NIL stuff is a side thing, and it's going to be a side thing for the vast majority of players. And if it's the main thing, then to me, that's a lot like anytime a prospect chooses Miami, I'm always like, well, never have to see you again. Like, you will never impact. I cover Ohio State. You will never impact any game I cover ever again, because now you have gone off to the land of wind and ghosts to do some laundry or whatever. And this is kind of like that now. Yeah, go ahead and Texas A&M, build up all of these monster rosters, but then try to keep them happy. Try to have a culture that can deal with all of that. You just, it's a lot to handle, and it's not necessarily the best way to build a winner just by bringing in a bunch of players who came there because of money. That's not how it works.
No. You're mistaken, Tony. This is the first time in history that Texas has had both good football program players and a lot of money. And as we've seen over the years, there is no more certain winner in college football than the University of Texas. So I'm sure success is guaranteed. No. But they have a flashy coach this time. So
okay, all right.
And as far as Miami, sir, I will have you know that the swag is back at the U. So you better check yourself, sir, before potentially you wreck yourself. Next question from the proctorologist. If Cincinnati and Michigan pull off the unthinkable, what will the narrative be as to how the two Northern Davids were able to slay the Southern Goliaths? Everyone uses that analogy, and it's like, did you read the Bible? Because that's actually how how will David, with the slingshot, it's simple. There's a whole book about it. You should read it sometime. Anyway, go ahead, Tony.
Oh, me. The narrative will be difficult for ESPN or the apologists in the SEC, because obviously these are games that you'd think Georgia and Alabama want to win. And we know when they don't win postseason games, it's because they didn't want to be there. You figure they do want to be there, unless they'd rather be home. Maybe it's like, oh, no, they were just homesick. Except, Tom, they don't usually go far from home to actually play the bowl games either. So I don't know that we can use that one. The narrative, how was this able to happen? I guess.
Do you need me to do this one for you? Come on. You're not new here, Tony. They had to go through that murderous SEC schedule, Tony.
That's true.
Do you know how difficult that is? How tired and beat up they are at the end of the season? Michigan only had to play in the Big Ten. I mean, that's barely a warm up. That's like the the guys who when they show up at Ohio State, they're like, I was gassed, and then Coach Mick was like, that was just a warm up. Like that's Michigan at the end of just the warm up of the SEC. That's just the SEC non-conference schedule. and Cincinnati, I mean, come on, please. They're barely playing the same sport. Tony, come on. They think they play flag football in the AAC. How could you possibly expect Georgia and Alabama? They just had to play each other like a month ago.
Yeah.
Come on, Tony. You can't expect that. It's not fair. It's not reasonable to expect that from two teams that have had to go through murderous slates such as Missouri, South Carolina, Georgia Tech, and such and such.
Mercer. McNeese State. Yeah, that's true. You get worn down over a long season of playing the best teams in the nation.
Do it grammatically incorrectly. You get wore down. Come on,
right.
think about who's talking here. You get wore down, Tony.
Get wore down. It's tough to wash that stuff off of you, and you just you get tired and you're sore, and then you got to what? Do it all again against lesser competition. I mean, you're asking a lot. Yeah, I agree with you, Tom. Haven't they proven enough? Shouldn't they just share the championship, or do you give it to Alabama for beating Georgia already? Or is that unfair to Georgia? Because they only lost to Alabama once.
That's true. Yeah, it's. I mean, really, the SEC championship game, as we all know, is the national championship game. It's canon. It's the only thing we know. Next one's from CJ Smitty. How do you fix officiating in college football? For the record, I don't believe in conspiracy theories or think they're biased. I just find them generally incompetent, inconsistent, and too slow for the modern version of the game. Now, I meant to look this up. They're still not full-time, right? These are not full-time officials in college football, are they? Because I mean, you can look that up. I don't think the Big Ten has gone to full-time football officials yet. I think they did for basketball, but I don't believe they did for football. And that's ultimately the answer is you have people who are doing this professionally, and you are paying these guys and gals now, a full-time living wage to be a football officials, where they're doing all year they're training, they are reading and rereading the rule book and getting tested on stuff, and they're doing constant video reviews, and they're doing all getting graded on all this stuff all year long. You make it a 12-month-a-year job, and then that's all they're focused on. Because right now, this was true a few years ago, and I believe it's still true. It's like this guy's a lawyer 5 days a week, and then he goes and officiates Big Ten games on the weekend, and then he comes back and he goes back to his law job during the week. So if that's the case, well, your focus is not entirely on officiating. And guess what? There's enough money in college football for them to just pay a bunch of, how many officiating crews do you really need for a league of 14 teams? If you had 10 officiating crews that were full-time, that would be more than enough. Really, you need 7 for your league games. And if you need to fill in here and there, like, okay, you fill in here and there, you have 9 crews to cover the 7-week, whatever it is. But you pay those. How many people are on an officiating crew? 8, something like that. I mean, can you pay 8 people? You pay them $1 million for, say it's $1 million a crew, and you need 9 crews. Do you think the Big Ten can probably pull $9 million out of its next TV deal? I suspect that they could if they really wanted to fix stuff. And you throw a little bit of replay, yada, yada on top of that. I mean, they are actually paying these people now. So it's not just $9 million just up from zero. But that's the way I would solve the problem. But have they done that yet, or is that still in the works?
Yeah, it doesn't. I'm trying to find something that says they are full-time, and I'm not seeing that. And a lot of what I'm seeing is, they make like $40,000 to $60,000 a year from doing this. So that tells me they're not full-time. Yeah, because these are all business people.
So double it. I mean, give everyone $150,000 a year. And I mean, if you really want to fix it, that's the way to fix it. But, is it good enough? And then they can spend the money on, putting another golden toilet in every head coach's office. Like, I mean, that's how the money typically gets spent. So, but yeah, that's how you actually, if you wanted to solve the problem, that's how you solve the problem.
I think another way one way that has made officials worse is all of the camera angles showing the things they've missed. And you're not going to go back from that. You're not, because how angry do we all get when we're like, show us the angle, show us the shot. And, you don't see, like, when you're at the game and they don't put controversial calls up on the scoreboard or whatever. Like there's going to be stuff that they will always miss. But I do think maybe like full-time is the answer. I don't know how much more that helps. Because I don't know that we would have to see it. Like show me the proof that these full-time refs make more of their calls correctly or have fewer bad calls. And then maybe you've got something, but also you've got to try something, like if you just keep doing the same thing, then you can't keep complaining about the refs. But I don't want to be ageist, but we've seen some of these refs for a long time and they've been doing this thing for a long time. And you wonder if you go younger, then you can pay less essentially for full-time people. You know what I'm saying? Like, if this has been all they've known, then they can climb up the salary ladder. Now, if it's a guy who's been a lawyer for 30 years and been a ref for 25 years, and now you're saying, well, look, we'll pay you 70 grand. And he's like, I make, 825. Like you can't. And so you wonder, like, at what point can they just say, okay, this is what we're doing, and either get on board or we have new refs? But you also have to have that's a preparation thing. You've got to have that in the pike. You've got to be working on that for years, I think, to have the number of refs that you need to step in for the guys who are like, no, I don't want to go full time.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. Now, could you potentially, if all the other leagues are not doing this yet, I bet you could pull the very best of the best from the, ACC and the Big 12. And, could you pull Glasses ref out of the Pac-12? I don't know. Did he retire a couple of years ago? I kind of think he probably did, because I don't remember seeing him botch any games. But man, if you could bring Glasses ref to the Big 12, Big 10, it would all be worth it. But yes, no, that's there is a first mover advantage here, where if you are the first ones to do it, guess what? You can probably bring in the very best of the best and get the guys, get the conferences who are, the guys who are grading out the best in their performance, because it's not going to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect. But if you have games that are not complete ref shows, and you have games where you don't lose complete control of the games, and you're not botching calls, and you're not, doing what they did at the end of the Coastal Carolina, Northern Illinois game, where it was just like, oh yeah, we screwed up. Sorry. Like, don't have too many of those and you'll be fine. But that's the option. This is like baseball teams not paying their minor leaguers a living wage. Like, just, if you just give them a place to live and you feed them actual good food and have a good chef there, and you pay them a decent amount where they don't have to work some separate job during the off season, and you'll actually get better baseball players out of it. But no one wants to do that because they're cheap, because they're Major League Baseball owners. It's the same thing in college football. If you want better officials, just pay them more money. This is literally, look around you, friends. This is America. This is literally how it works here. Just pay them more money, give them more stuff, and you will end up with a better class of individual doing the job. That's it.
I was thinking also, you can just sprinkle them in, these full timers. And I looked at the NFL, and that's kind of what they've done. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at an article from like 2018 where it says the NFL hires 24 full-time game officials. That was up from 21 from the inaugural year of the program in 2017. And so you got these guys that they're around all year long. That's what they do. And these are referees, they're umpires, line judges, side judges, back judges, where I think you try to build a consistency, and maybe these are guys that are, like tent poles. They're like captains essentially, and you continue to you lean on them, and they lead their own groups and their own troops and build from there. And if their focus is on this year round, you would think they would get better at it. But still, being refs, Tom, as we close here, they're still refs. How dang good could they be anyway, when we know they make all kinds of mistakes? But it's like the 10,000 hours thing. I don't know that any ref has 10,000 hours of anything other than torturing America, honestly. But, if this is your sole thing, you should get better at it.
Yeah, you should get better at it. You should just avoid the like really embarrassing missteps. Like having been on the field, like I can tell you, the game moves very quickly. And I've been on the field for a couple of years now, and it's like you can't really appreciate how big and how fast a lot of the stuff is happening. And the when you're down at field level, like sometimes how the up camera gets fooled on play action and stuff like that. Like it is even harder when you're down on the field and you're the back judge in the back of the end zone, and the quarterback hands the ball off to the running back. Or does he? Because there's a bunch of 300-pound dudes on both sides of the line of scrimmage between you and the ball, and it's like, okay, is it there? Wait, there it goes. It's over my shoulder. Like it is very difficult to to follow the action on the field at times, and they're moving very fast, and it's just you're trying to look at. Did he, one guy's trying to look at, did he get his foot in? The other guy's trying to look at, did he catch the ball? And his back is turned a certain way. And it's, maybe his back is to you, and it's almost impossible. And it's almost miraculous that they get it right as often as they do after watching from the field level for a while. So I do tend to be willing to show referees a little more grace. Not basketball referees, though. They ruin everything and make the game so much worse. So that's a totally different thing. But football, yeah, it's fine. It's, they're not going to be perfect. That's all right.
If football refs could just have a table that they could go to as much as basketball refs do and stop the game and just, hey, let's just pause and take a look. Oh, man, that would be the worst. So I think that will do it for this episode, Tom, unless you have anything else you would like to say before we go.
Nope. We have many, many more episodes coming later this week. We know you guys are traveling, and you guys are probably looking for ways to escape your families at times, perhaps this week. So we're going to do our very best to give you stuff to listen to on your plane or in your car or in the living room when Uncle Frank just won't stop talking about whatever Uncle Frank is talking about. Uncle Frank, he just can't stop. So we'll do our very best to keep you entertained throughout the most wonderful time of the year, and then may have a little travel news next week, which would be fun as well. So should be a good time.
And if we don't keep you entertained, at the very least, hopefully we kept you distracted. So that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.